Victoria 3's first expansion, Voice of the People, continues to come under fire this week with all-time reviews on Steam sitting at around 26% positive. It would be fair to say that the reception to this DLC has been mostly negative. And you only need to cast your eyes down the screen a little further to see that essentially, update is good, DLC is a disappointment. This should be in the base game, I can't find the changes, it's too expensive, I'm never pre-ordering again, etc. There are plenty of complaints around this DLC, and Paradox are attempting to address those to put out the fire that is Victoria 3 at the moment. In this video, we're going to take a look at their official reply that was released yesterday, Voice of the People, improvements that need to be made. They address some key areas, weak points in the DLC as they highlight, and give us some ideas for the future of Victoria 3. Let's jump in. This week's Dev Diary was supposed to be about post-release plans for Victoria 3, the kind of what's next, a new patch, a future DLC, and of course we know that there's going to be more DLC down the line. But they changed their mind because they were, quote, not satisfied with the narrative content included in Voice of the People, end quote. In particular, they see weak points in some journal entries, such as they're too passive, they don't provide enough of a challenge, they're detached from the rest of the game's systems, and there's not enough interaction with countries outside of France. This is despite them arguing in previous Dev Diaries that this wasn't really a French DLC, but more a flavor pack to enhance the game. Clearly, viewers and players, at least many of us, have disagreed. Now, it's important to note that since the release of the update, they have pumped out 2 patches, hotfix 1.3.1, and then of course 1.3.2, which was released just on Tuesday of this week. So they have been pumping out patches. For the most part, though, if we click into it, you'll see it tends to just be fixing issues. You can see almost all of these bullet points start with fixed an issue. So I'll leave the patch notes there, not too much to discuss. Back on the topic at hand, though, they say that they've spent the last couple of weeks, as we've talked about, going over what improvements and plans for future content. They touched on it in last week's Dev Diary a little bit, and they're going to delve into some further detail today. They first wanted to mention when owners of Voice of the People can expect to see the improvements. What kinds of things are they actually working on? Substantial ones that aren't just fixes. Well, we're expecting patch 1.3.3 to roll out on the 26th of June. I would note that's still a few weeks away. It'll contain bug fixes, balance improvements as well, and we can expect remaining improvements in early Q3. A reminder, don't at me, that starts in July, moving swiftly along. Now let's look at some of the specific things. What are they actually going to do? And then we'll take a step back and remind ourselves about the game plan that's going on here. They first highlighted divided monarchists as a particular problematic area, ticking all of the boxes for their problematic recipe for a flawed DLC. Rather than the player selecting their preferred dynasty, establishing a character with the right ideology and government, and waiting while engaging with the occasional event, there will be now 3 separate tracks, one for each dynasty and ideology, and that will increase or decrease independently of one another at different speeds depending on multiple factors, including what character exists in the country, and also what the player is actually doing in France. What they intend to do here is to ensure that us as players, that our preferred candidate is actually threatened by opposing ideologies, inviting us to plan ahead, do more character management, and the new interactions inside of Voice of the People, agitators, exile mechanics, they argue will prove as powerful tools to do this. All events associated with journal entry will be revised, with options that relate to 3 dynasties differently. Those 3 key elements that sort of separate France apart from a lot of the rest. You won't merely be advancing or setting back the monarchist cause, but rather advancing one individual dynasty while setting back the others, alongside other effects and trade-offs. I think that's a really good idea, actually, to add a little bit more diversity and intrigue between those ideologies, because at the moment, they do very much just kind of separately exist. You tick one, you tick the boxes, you do it. Journal entries are also going to offer country-wide effects while they're active. Divided monarchist journal entries in effect, for example, a low legitimacy government will result in much greater radicalism across France than before, which will encourage resolving the dynastic crisis sooner rather than later. A failure condition will also be added, resulting in France's collapse back into republicanism. And finally, once your preferred candidate sits on the throne, cementing their dynastic reign, it'll require us to prove they're capable of effective rule by adding more conditions to have to fulfill in order to resolve the journal entry successfully and in a reasonable amount of time. Failing to meet those conditions and cement your dynasty may even result in another period of dynastic squabbling. Very French. Love it. The other case study that they've used in this developer's diary to highlight how they intend to fix voice of the people is around the natural borders of France, the one that I'm trying to play out in this gameplay. The main issue is that France's international aspirations have no direct impact on the nations affected, beyond except, becoming targeted in subsequent diplomatic plays, the flow-on effect. Their intent is to add more international fallout from the actions France takes during the entry, which of course will see them invade the likes of the Netherlands, Belgium, Prussia, most likely, certainly the last two, with events for Prussia and Germany and perhaps other affected countries that both inform and give them options for how to deal with the situation. They'll also be addressing Haiti's debtor relationship with France by adding a new journal entry that gives Haiti more options on how to resolve their debt situation. And now they take a step back and give us some kind of general ideas, general improvements that they'll be making in update 1.3, which is rolling out later this month. Alongside, of course, these tweaks and changes to Voice of the People. They say that they are, quote, aware that older narrative content in Victoria 3 also exhibits similar issues to the ones we have revised from Voice of the People, end quote. We should assume and expect that they'll gradually revise the other content to bring the standard up through free updates, something credit where credit's due, they're very good at delivering on. Other ways in which we will improve Voice of the People, they say, include notifications, which will be looked over and enhanced to ensure appropriate parties are informed of relevant events. Indochina crisis, for example, is but one which certainly made international news at the time, and if it's appropriate, they're going to try and make sure that we're informed about the events, even when we're not directly involved as players. They're also planning to do some additional work on the AI related to Voice of the People, specifically improving French AI handling of the Algerian colonies, something that I quickly took in this gameplay, and the related journal entry, and improving the characteristic behaviors of the French AI while led by one of the 3 dynastic monarchs, that key area of focus. More broadly, they have a few general improvements for update 1.3 that'll roll out on the 26th, alongside bug fixes and balance. One concern with the ability to invite exiles is that there's no indication there's someone new and recruitable in there without going and looking at it all the time. Yeah, that is kind of problematic. As a first pass to addressing it, they're going to notify us under certain circumstances when a character is exiled, so we can get a heads up that there's a reason to go and check it out. The industry banned law is also going to be revisited to ensure that even if it may be unlikely to lead to economic prosperity, it at least fills a valid niche for a certain kind of country. Bringing us toward the conclusion, they say, due to its sandboxy, systemic nature, Victoria 3 is not the easiest game to write historical content for, and we're still working on honing in on exactly what type of events and journal entries are the most fun for you to engage with. But that is no excuse, and you deserve better. Our greatest asset as developers is to be able to have this dialogue with you, and we deeply appreciate your constructive criticism. Our many learnings here will be carried forward to all future narrative content we write, where it will make for more challenging and fun gameplay in a world that feels more alive. Next week, we'll return with the aforementioned update to our post-release plans, as well as more info about the open beta we're planning for later this year. Until then. And that concludes today's video, everybody. I think that actually out of everything that we looked at today, that second last paragraph about them finding it difficult, not the easiest game to write historical content for. The fact that they say that that's no excuse, that we deserved better, this is a great asset, that's certainly a nice thing to hear, coming out of what honestly I think is a studio that's done a pretty good job at providing a substantial amount of lengthy free updates. Now, whether you thought the content should have been there from the start, I certainly hear that all the time, or any of the other criticisms, indeed, totally valid. But I think it's also important to draw a line here. And I think that Voice of the People is actually a very good example of something that also delivered a free update. And it's not the first one that we've seen, whether you think they should have been there from the start or many of the other things. I think it's important to note that these free updates have provided a lot to Victoria 3, and I'm glad to see it's still being supported. I'll see you next time.